Shalom guys, welcome back to another episode of Just Shove Your Ministries with Casa de Israel Yarah. Thank you for being there. So, this week we're going to continue with the weekly Torah portions with the study of the book of Exodus or Shemot. And we are in Torah Portion Bo. Okay? This is obviously the confrontation between Jehovah, the God of Israel, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and Pharaoh. And Moses as the one intercessing on behalf of the people and in representation of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh alongside his brother Aaron. And so we are in the middle or towards the end basically of the confrontation, in which, like I introduced to you 2 weeks ago, the concept of Pharaoh being confronted with commands, and how the commandments of God can be a conflicting element into a man's or a person's life, because it would go against or it could go against everything that you believe, think, and have structure your life to be. The standards of holiness and purity and morality that are attributed in worship and dedication that are requested by God are much different than the ones that you expect to give or manifest. And so when Pharaoh is confronted by another deity that is invisible, but is speaking through a man, and he himself, Pharaoh, is God himself as a man, a representative of the divine essence of embodiment of the gods. It's very conflicting. But in this story, in this narrative, Pharaoh's power is subjected to mere human interpretation or human illusion, while Moses' words are bringing forth mighty signs and wonders and miracles and plagues. And so it's a very conflicting moment for Pharaoh, as someone that has all the authority and all the power and all the knowledge and all the wisdom in the world, and in his case as the God of the Son, the most powerful one. And so the commandments of God can do that. It can bring you from this high horse to a crumbling destruction if you're not willing to listen. Okay, so let's get into the portion. Like I always say, if you like the content that we have on our channel, like, subscribe. If you have questions, comments, concerns, put it in the comment section down below. Okay, so let's get started. Torah Portion Bull. So when you enter, right? So this is going to be the last confrontation that Moses will have. One of the last confrontations that Moses will have. Okay, Exodus 10, verse 1 through chapter 13, verse 16. The half Torah, the prophets portion, is Jeremiah chapter 46, verses 13 to 28. And the Brichlesha New Testament portion is Romans 14, verses Romans 9, chapter verse 14 through 29. Sorry. Okay. And so last week's Torah portion, but I reported how Pharaoh refused to listen to Moses, his plea for Israel's freedom, despite 7 devastating plagues that came upon Egypt in God's name. In this week's portion, the battle between God and Pharaoh comes to a dramatic conclusion. The last three of the 10 plagues are unleashed upon Egypt. A swarm of locusts devour all the crops and greenery, and palpable darkness involved in the land for 3 days and nights. And all firstborn of Egypt were killed at the stroke of midnight of the 15th month of Aviv or Nisan. Before we get started, let's do a Torah blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Havorah, Baruch Adonai Havorah le'olam ba'eh, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim ve'natananu et torato, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Blessed Adonai who is blessed. Blessed Adonai who is blessed now and forever. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has chosen us from among the peoples and given us the Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, who gives the Torah. Amen. Exodus 10 verse 1 says, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe bo el Faraón hi ani hi bedeti et lib va et lib abada lema'an shiti otat ele vehorbo. In English, it says the following. And the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and his hearts of his officials, so that I may perform these signs in mine among them, that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I dealt harshly with the Egyptians and how I performed my signs among them, that you may know that I am the Lord. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, this is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, so that they may worship me. Now, the way I love to describe this book is the book of the crushing of the egos. In this case, the biggest ego that's being crushed is Pharaoh's. Because you have to understand that the biggest reason why Pharaoh has oppressed Israel is because he was afraid that they will leave. And if they leave, they will unite with other nations and come to destroy them, because they were becoming big and numerous and strong, and obviously they had a certain level of presence in Egypt. So he recognized that they looked as if they could overpower him if he didn't take control of this. But remember, all of that was fabricated, right? He just saw them and assumed that they could take over and then leave and unite with others. So now he's having this big conflict that their God, the God of the Hebrews, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Joseph, who he decides to not recognize, is telling him to let them go. Let them go free. Let them go and worship me. And that will entail that the people of Israel have to worship someone else that is not Pharaoh. They will have to serve someone else that is not Pharaoh. And in this case, Jehovah is the one saying that they're going to worship him, but the one speaking is Moses. And God told us that in Pharaoh's eyes, he's going to have a big struggle with his ego, understanding that it's not Moses that is doing all these things, but it's the invisible God, the one that is present, giving him commands. But Pharaoh cannot get over the fact that it's him, and he only sees Moses as the image. And that is something that he is struggling with, because he has to let the people go. And his fear, he has to confront it and trust God, because God is just asking him, let my people go so they worship me in the desert. And Pharaoh is consistently refusing to let his guard down and obey the command. Okay? And so, is the most important element in the narrative. Obey commandments, obey God's commandment, trust in his words, so that God's will is fulfilled. Pharaoh doesn't understand the message, so he is consumed by his ego. Okay? So, there's a couple elements here that we're going to discuss. So, there are the 42 laws of Ma'at, and they are set as divine laws, transcribed by the ancient Egyptians in or around 2925 BCE. Then transcribed in the hieroglyphs on a scroll called the Papyrus of Ani. The 42 laws were discovered in 1888 in Luxor, Egypt. The 42 ideals of Ma'at are these. Right? And we're not gonna necessarily read all of them, but for example, it has honor, virtue. I benefit with gratitude. I am peaceful. I respect the property of others. I affirm that all life is sacred. I give offerings that are genuine. I live in truth. I regard all altars with respect. I speak with sincerity. I consume only my fair share. I offer words of good intent. I relate in peace. I honor animals with reverence. I can be trusted. I care for the earth. I keep my own counsel. I speak positively to others. I remain in balance with an emotion. I am trustful in my relationships. I hold purity in high esteem. I spread joy. I do my the best I can. I communicate with compassion. Interesting, right? I listen to opposing opinions. I create harmony. I invoke laughter. I open to love in various forms, and I'm forgiving. I'm kind. I act respectfully of others. I am accepting. I follow my inner guidance. I converse with awareness. I do good. I give blessings. I keep the waters pure. I speak with good intent. I praise the goddess and the god. I am humble. I achieve integrity. I advance through my own abilities, and I embraced them all. Right. So it's interesting. This is somewhat of a conceptual structure of laws that this Pharaoh would have to hold himself to. That he is a humble man. Right, that he is willing to listen, right? That he is, in many ways, conscious of who he is and what he represents, and that is the laws that, in the concept of Ma'at, which means a goddess of order, which is the one that her feather is used in the judgment of Pharaoh's heart when he enters the afterlife, is the foundational thing that represent him. And in this case, when you read these 42, that you can go back in the video, you see that Pharaoh doesn't represent these, especially by a simple introduction of God saying, let my people go. By God saying, let my people go, Pharaoh forgets about the 42 laws of Ma'at. Because in the 42 laws of Ma'at, he is describing himself as someone that keeps peace and order in Egypt, and all of them Pharaoh throws down the drain, because it gets to the point where his own people say, hey, we have been destroyed, we are done, let them go. You don't see that we have been destroyed? You don't see that you have failed to protect us? They are protected. Their God has been faithful to them and been merciful to them and gracious to them. But you have destroyed us, Egypt. Okay? So, it's interesting. The elements of order and structure that Pharaoh believed to be true are destroyed by the simple introduction of God's commandments. Okay? So, the God's needs were not cared for just so that people would be graced with good harvest. The temple was the control center for order in the cosmos, and the order had to be maintained. The deity needed to be cared for so that his or her energies could be focused on the important work of holding the forces of chaos at bay. The rituals therefore served not simply as gifts to the deity or mechanical liturgical works or words of actions. The rituals provided a means by which humans could play a role in maintaining order in the cosmos. So, the priests were the specialists who passed the knowledge and the responsibility for ensuring the access to sacred space, and that the sacred space was protected, and that the rituals were properly performed. The god's privacy needed to be guarded and his needs met so that he could be about his cosmic business. Creation was renewed and maintained through the various rituals and ceremonies. Egyptian thinking attached these functions not only to the role of the priest, but also to the role of king. In Egypt, priests operated only by authority delegated from the king, who had the sole right to perform the rituals of the cult. It was his task to complete what was unfinished and preserve the existence, not as status quo, but in continuing dynamic, even revolutionary processes of remodeling and improvement. Thus, in the ritual observance, the order of the cosmos not only was maintained, but was transferred to society, resulting in political and social order. The royal performance of the cult, generally speaking, invoked the sacred power of the preservation of Ma'at, the world order. Okay, so it's interesting that the sequence of preservation of order and structure had to do with, obviously, there's a temple, there's ritual, there's priest, and in this case, the pharaoh or the king was part of it. He was able to be king and priest as the image of God, as the divine representation, and this concept is destroyed basically in the aspect of the Egyptians, because Pharaoh didn't want to obey God's commandments. Okay, now there is an element it's interesting about this story, which is Amun or Amun-Ra is the ancient god of the sun and air. He is one of the most important gods of ancient Egypt, who rose to prominence at the beginning of the period of the New Kingdom, in 1570 to 1069 BCE. His cult was the most powerful and popular in Egypt for centuries. He is usually depicted as a bearded man wearing a headdress with a double plumb, or after the New Kingdom, as a ram-headed man, or simply a ram, symbolizing fertility. Okay, in his role as Amun his name means the hidden one, invisible, mysterious of form. And unlike most other Egyptian gods, he was considered Lord of all, who encompassed every aspect of creation. Okay, so it's interesting because this god, Amun-Ra, is invisible. You can't see him, but you can hear him like the wind. And he also represents light, the sun. Right? So their perception of the ram, the goat, or usually also sheep, was an association. These animals were sacred because they were associated with this god. Ram, the sheep, and goats, in many ways, are associated to this. But in this picture, the most accurate depiction is the ram. Okay, and so one of the most important words in this book, and the preceding books, really is remember. Right, the key to remember what's about to happen, and the conclusion of this conflict between Pharaoh and between Moses, but in reality is Pharaoh against God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, is remember. Right, we as the listeners, we as the believers, have to remember what happened. The consequences of disobedience, the consequences of not humbling yourself to God, not recognizing him, not honoring his words and respecting what he is requesting of you as his creation. Because remember, Pharaoh is a human being. He's part of God's creation. And in this situation, the God of the Hebrews saved Egypt once. He saved Egypt when Joseph was second in command. And he was recognized as second in command. And he was a Hebrew that interpreted dreams of Pharaoh in his times. And that his wisdom that God had given him, that he had confessed that it was God's wisdom and God's revelation and God's interpretation, was what brought forth salvation to Egypt in famine, in prosperity, and harvest. And so when this Pharaoh forgets about that, God has to make him remember. And he's telling us, remember, don't forget what happens when you let your ego get in the way and you don't humble yourself to my commandments. Okay? Now, this is a very important element that the people of Israel need to learn, is this. God heard their groaning. In Exodus 2:24-25, God heard their groaning and remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. And this is important because the foundation of God remembering Israel was Abraham's faith. Abraham believed, and it was counted to him as righteousness. He acted upon his faith. The same way with Isaac, the same way with Jacob, and the same way with Joseph. And Israel is being remembered now in Egypt because of that faith. So now they have to follow the same faith of Abraham. God is going to start giving them instructions, starting with the Passover. There's going to be key instructions that they will receive. And if they obey these instructions by faith, through Moses, through a God that is invisible, but you can hear him like the wind and see it like the light. If they obey Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh and Moses, the firstborns will be saved and they will be redeemed from Egypt. That makes sense? Oh, you're asking you like you can respond. Okay, so by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to mistreat along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded this grace for the sake of Messiah as a greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover and the application of the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. And understand that through all this, Moses has to believe that what God is telling him will happen. And also the people have to see the testimony of Moses and the signs of his faith be manifested. And they have also to follow suit, just like Moses, trusting God and his instructions. Okay. James 2:14-24 says, What is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or his sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, Go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it's not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, You have faith and have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith with my deeds. You believe that there's one God. Good. Even the demons believe that and shuddered. You foolish person, do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? Was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You see that his faith and his actions were working together. His faith was made complete by what he did. And the scriptures was fulfilled that says Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. And he was called God's friend. You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do, not by faith alone. And so, this is key, because in Pharaoh's case, he believes God, or he believes in God, or he has a concept of God. But like the demons, is meaningless, because even though he believed God, he never obeyed God. He said, No, yeah, tell your God to stop the plagues, that we have sinned, we have done something wrong. But each time he demonstrated that he didn't have faith. He demonstrated that he didn't believe in God truly, that he didn't believe that what was happening was a byproduct of his disobedience. He just believed that, hey, you are God and I can reason with you without obeying you. I can say I recognize you, God, but I don't really have to obey what you have to say. I will continue to do what I want. And Pharaoh had a big problem because God was trying to make a point with Pharaoh. I will tell you, I am true. And I will give you the commandments that will demonstrate to you that I am true. But if you don't obey them, you don't have true faith. And you're just like a demon. You believe, but even those demons shudder in their belief. So faith without works is dead. The Israelites believed God. But when they believe God, God says, okay, if you believe in me, you're going to take the lamb and you're going to put the blood on the doorpost. And if they don't obey that commandment, they don't believe. If Moses doesn't take the staff and go speak to Pharaoh, he can believe that God spoke to him, but if he doesn't put into action that, we wouldn't be here. And so, it is key to the story. It is foundational to the story. How commandments of God, when introduced to a new life, a new mind, a new body, a new perception, can be destructive if we're not willing to listen. Because if we're willing to listen, God's commandments can be of life, restoration, restructuring, order. In the beginning, God, through His Spirit, spoke and brought forth order. But we have to be willing to humble ourselves. Like God told Pharaoh, how long will it take you to humble yourself? How long will it take for you to believe in me and act upon that? So as believers, we have to have that in mind. God is faithful. He remembers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob because of their faith. And He's faithful to them because they committed. They acted upon their faith. They have fruits of obedience to God's instructions. So we have faith. We have faith. We confess it. But now we have to show fruits through how we live and act following God's commandments. So that's all I got for this week. So when we enter, we go into the presence of our inner Pharaoh, our ego. We have to recognize that we have to follow the commandments. We have to let go of our past, of our ignorance and disobedience, our sin. And through Messiah, we have been made free. It has been paid. Our ignorance has been cleared. Now we have a clean slate. We have access to believing and acting upon that belief. So let's get to it. Have a good week. Shavua Tov and Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.